Members of the press, you have heard from the leaders of our party, the NEVIS Reformation Party, on the issues affecting our country. And momentarily, I would allow you to ask questions of these four gentlemen seated here at the front. Before that, though, I want to let you and the country know that the NEVIS Reformation Party will be staging another walk through Charlestown, or march if you wish, this Friday, the 1st of November, at 4 p.m., commencing at the DR Walwyn Plaza, proceeding eastwards to the administration building.
South.
That's south. Okay, through Main Street to the administration building, and then back downtown around the Bayfront up through the road between Slack and Scotiabank, back on the Main Street to the DR Walwyn Plaza, where we will have a public rally. So we want to invite all Nevisians to come out in this walk-through, all geared towards holding the CCM government feet to the fire to ensure that they start to govern this country, because we feel that in 9 months they have not got their bearings right yet, and they have not begun to perform. Ladies and gentlemen, as usual, you now have the floor. Please identify your media house, yourself and media house, and you're free to ask questions of any member of the panel, of course, through the chair.
Good morning. Andre Huey, Win FM. Mr. Parry, I'll start with you first. You read from the submission from Mr. Brantley, but in the case, or the appeal case last week, regarding costs, based on the transcripts from the court, the former electoral officials, Mr. Benjamin and Mrs. Lawrence, based on the transcript, have agreed to pay costs as it pertains to the High Court, the appeal court in particular, all costs related, which of course includes yours and Mr. Daniel, particularly where the appeal court is concerned. Based on this, based on what has transpired in court, do you still believe that the court has exonerated both you and Mr. Daniel regarding the case? And in the same breath, you could also answer whether or not you are satisfied or comfortable with both officials bearing all costs relating to the case.
Okay, first of all, let me say that I am advised by a lawyer that they never agreed to pay costs. They said they understood that all costs will be borne by them if Mr. Dallin and myself did not have to pay costs. I choose my words carefully because I don't like this word exonerate, because you can't exonerate me for something that I didn't do. So basically, they understood, and if you read, you'll see that, they understood that they will bear the total cost if we did not have to pay costs. If you look at the submission, and I think you should get a copy of the submission, and you look at the court order, you understand how the thing worked. The court order has no mention in there except at the top of the names of Mr. Daniel or myself. And so the costs, the total costs, go to these two persons. Let me say that the costs that they bear in their capacity as officials of the government. So I think people may think that it is a personal cost. It is not. But that is not the major point for me. The major point for me is that in reading the submission by Mr. Brantley, and by Mr. Brantley identifying in paragraph 8 that the court made a mistake, which he conceded to, that is enough to clear Mr. Daniel and myself from misfeasance and bad faith. This is what this document does. I don't have to go to this transcript. I go to the court order. I go to the court order, which erases our names completely and therefore says nothing about us. Now, I will also argue this. If the law court judge, Justice Lionel Jones, said to me that there were no charges against me, so I didn't have to be in court. If the law court, led by Justice Lionel Jones, did not find me guilty of anything, and if, according to this document, the appeals court can't introduce new evidence, what exoneration must they give? Because if you listen to Hensley very closely this morning, what he said was that the document read that we should have been found guilty. We were not found guilty. We should have been. So you can't exonerate me because I was not found. We can use subjunctive, we can use whatever mode we want to use. The point is, we were never charged and we were never found. Therefore, we remain as we are, free, honest men. We don't need to be pardoned. I can't pardon you of something you didn't do. I need to beg your forgiveness for charging you for something you did not do. I cannot be exonerated. And that is the point that people deliberately keep missing. Deliberately keep missing. That it was confusion. It would have been a miscarriage of justice. And we seem to be afraid of these things. And I want to say this, that there was some delinquency demonstrated here. And we need to hold the court feet to the fire like we'll hold other people's feet to the fire. And we can't slide past the court and try to say that we were guilty because the transcript wasn't changed, or we were found guilty when the court was not in a position to do so. The court was not in a position to do so. So I am quite satisfied that I am free, I'm honest. What bothers me though, that the stigma that was attached to me at the beginning will take time to clear. And so I have to now defend myself in the court of public opinion, because the appeals court is the final court. And that is what I'm doing today, and I'm using facts. I'm using the court documents. I am not making up stories. And it is all clear to whoever wants to read and understand and appreciate what happened, and would soon accept that it was wrong, that I was wronged. And let me go further and say that there are ramifications, because people respect the court, and people believed, and some people might have stayed at home, others would have voted against us because in their eyes we did something wrong. But worse than that, if I may repeat myself, this submission, Mr. Brantley's submission, stating quite clearly that they did not charge us with anything, they didn't accuse us of anything, and actually conceding that we did not do anything. But yet, the same Mr. Brantley went and brought charges, an injunction against Mr. Daniel. Now, what do you say about that? What do you say? What does the press say? What does the media say? When a man who is a trained lawyer, who claims to be a senior lawyer in Nevis, on the one hand, makes a concession, and thereafter, not before, thereafter then charges the man of being dishonest. What does that say about the person? And why is it that the press is not taking up this and questioning that? Because I want to say this. When people behave in a particular way, when you add up all these little contradictions, it builds a picture. It builds a character picture. And I want to say to you this morning that when you have a picture like that, where again and again Mr. Brantley has said things and then contradicted himself when he has actually erased statements that he has made and tampered with the statements? Why doesn't it lead to questions about the man and present statements and future statements and actions? Why? That is what I want to know.
Just a follow-up question. There seems to probably be a misunderstanding as what actually transpired or what is actually the case, because based on what we understand from what transpired, Mr. Benjamin in particular specifically said that he understands that what is to be paid by Mr. Daniel and Mr. Parry will be the responsibility of us. Meaning,
you heard what you just said?
Right.
He understands.
Right.
Okay.
So,
and I'm telling you he understood. I didn't tell you he agreed. He never said he agreed.
So you're saying that that both of them did not agree then to pay all costs?
No, they didn't agree to pay our costs. They could not agree to pay our costs. They understood that they will have to pay costs minus us. They understood that.
But that's not what the transcripts say. It says that
but
they,
is you read it to me?
understand that.
Is you
no,
read
I'm saying that he was asked if
he
comprehends,
understood,
and he said that he understands that what is to be paid by Mr. Daniel and Mr. Parry, then that would be part of their responsibility.
Because the costs are the costs. The costs are the costs. The costs, the court awarded costs, and the court used a loop to pull Mr. Daniel and I in as a person who would have to pay the costs. The court was wrong. And so we are no longer paying the costs, but the costs remain. And so those who remain responsible to pay the costs would pay the costs. That's what they understood. But it's not as if Mr. Daniel's costs and my costs were put on these two people. No.
Well, okay. Well, that seems to be the reasoning or the general consensus is that.
I am not interested in consensus. I'm interested in fact.
And that again is based on the facts from the transcripts. I'm reading what is from the transcript.
Yeah, but I'm interested in fact, and you know why it's very important? Because people are now seeking to say we are still guilty. Actually, there are about 1 or 2 persons I have to take to court.
Which is the next point I'm going to lead into. If you believe that the court's ruling led to both you and Mr. Daniel, or the NRP, losing the election, and of course besmirching your character and Mr. Daniel's character, do any of you intend to take legal action or to clear your name, basically?
Well, I have been advised that this is the final court of appeal. I have been advised that I cannot take the judges to court. I have been advised that. Who I can take to court are people who seek to libel my character. And there are 2 persons. I am actually in contact with a lawyer right now. And I want substantial costs because we have to put a stop to this behavior. We have to put a stop to this behavior because if you read what's happening here, you can see quite clearly that we should not have been part of it in the first place. So anybody, the problem is getting local lawyers. And I could say much about that, when local lawyers are afraid to go against the court. But I wouldn't bother with that. What I will say that if I have to get lawyers from Antigua or wherever, I am going to take up this matter of persons seeking to malign me and libel me. I cannot take the court to court as far as I understand, but I can stand up for my rights, and I can use my capability to argue and to articulate to show that the court made a mistake, and nothing is going to stop me from saying that. And this document here, paragraph 8, uses a very interesting term. The term is homonaded. Homonaded. And a lawyer explains to me the phrase homo sometimes nods or even homonad means that even someone who is at the best at what they can do can turn a subpar performance. It is a translation of a line from Ars Poetica, that's Latin, by the Roman poet Horace. The sense of a nod meant here is not the downward motion of the head used to indicate a yes, a response to something, but the drooping of the head as an indication that someone is about to nod off to sleep. You understand? You understand?
Okay, just let me add one other thing to that. I too have seen some articles suggesting, and I have listened to some radio programs suggesting that I am guilty of something. So I will ask the same persons and writers to explain to the court what they mean. And so I too will seek some damages, but I will go further. The Amnesty International guarantees the rights of every citizen. I am going to complain to Amnesty International that my fundamental rights to remain innocent have been abridged by the court. And my letter is already written. And so I will send it, because nobody must be able, I don't matter who they are, whether they are judges of high court or appeals court, must have the freedom to indicate to the citizens that they are guilty without charge.
You had some really damning statements to say about the court, Mr. Daniel.
You had something to say about me too.
Regarding the ruling. Do you believe then that the court has lost its reputation for justice, and as such, that regular citizens may not trust the court?
I am scared about justice in the country. Okay? When a court of law can award costs against you for having done nothing, it must, Mr. Huey, begin to raise questions as to the competence and independence of the court. Here am I in Nevis. I have been in Nevis in public life since 1977 as a teacher. My role has always been, and my modus operandi, I am still trying to find anybody in Nevis. I've been in and out of the government. Nobody has associated me with any hanky-panky, and what's yet a judge who should know better? Come on, this is not supposed to be acceptable. I have been here. I was in primary school in 1971 when my mother died. And in 6 months after leaving secondary school, my father died. So I have been careful to engage and involve myself only in the things which are in line with the law. So for somebody to come after all these years, I have been responsible for several community organizations, several expenditures of money, culture, clubs, and so on. See, my colleague here of 30-something years, what is this? How could I feel comfortable after all this for a court of law to come to say that I am guilty of bad faith and misconduct, that borders on fraud? And he didn't say that he finds it. He said a judge should have found. Well, I still want to know which fact, because it says based on the facts found by him, meaning Justice Jones, which facts? And if the court, Mr. Huey, seeks to go to reach or to leap in order to hurt me, that's a matter for them. It's not a matter for me, you know. The court has to regain its integrity, and the court has to build its own confidence. Because I am going to conclude like Delroy Chuck in Jamaica. He's a lawyer and Speaker of the House. He wrote a book since '87 on understanding crime. And he said, at the fountain of justice, the law courts, power and money are the dominant factors. The court has to prove otherwise to that. But if you were in my position, seeking to be elected, having been in government, and you have a final court saying that about you, shouldn't you be upset? Shouldn't you be worried? Would you have confidence in the court?
Okay, Master Leslie from Vaughan Radio. Mr. Parry, I just need to get something cleared up. It might sound like belaboring the point, but you maintain that the court was wrong, and you base that on the document which you read this morning, which you said is a submission from Mr. Brantley.
Yes.
But respectfully said this is a submission. This is not the finding of the court.
Yes,
so you make a submission.
But he's a respondent. He's a respondent. He has gone back to the court to say.
No, the court has to issue its finding.
And the court did.
I know you said that you wasn't interested in the transcript.
The transcript is not the important thing. It's the decision of the court that's important.
Well, that's it. That's what I was leading to, because based on my knowledge, I'm not a lawyer, but based on what was in the transcript, this was the order of the court, because the transcript said, and the judges were specific, that paragraph 92 of the judgment should be rewritten to reflect that your names were deleted.
Absolutely.
Good. That was done because the two other persons who were charged jointly and severally agreed to pay the cost.
No.
This is what it...
You're leaping.
With all due respect, sir, you said that you didn't read this transcript, right? You said you didn't read this transcript, you don't want to read it. I read the transcript. I'm speaking from what I read in the transcript.
Okay, but let me ask you a question
before I go. Let me just finish off. Are you telling us then that we should not, what was said in this transcript is not the correct picture?
Let me ask you a question, because I'm dealing with the order of the court. What kind of court would say to you, Mr. Powell, you and Mr. Parry are wrong, but if you agree to pay all costs, we let Mr. Parry go? What kind of court will say that? Just think about it. Just think about it. What kind of court will say that? Because if that is the conclusion you come to, then you then put the court in a deeper state of confusion. All those who come to the conclusion, they're putting the court in a deeper hole of confusion.
But Mr. Parry,
yeah,
with all due respect, the two electoral officials, they agreed to pay the full cost.
No,
Mr. Parry, if I may, and maybe for clarity, we should all try to understand the English language as it is written. Let me look at the order, because people seem to think that understand and accept are synonymous. They are not the same. The two officials from the electoral office said, and I'm reading the order, each understands that if the application is granted as filed, they would both be liable for the payment of all costs. My saying that I understand you is not the same as saying that I accept what you said.
No, they agreed.
No,
Hold on, they agreed.
Do you have a copy of the transcript?
No, I don't have it with me.
Can you show me where in the transcript
Listen,
it says they agreed?
that is why they were asked over and
It
over.
says they
If you
understand in the order.
So,
Understanding and accepting
Mr.
are
Powell, with
totally
all due
different
respect, this
things.
is just, I mean,
No,
semantics.
No. Don't call me that. Understanding and accepting are
Listen,
totally
if
different
I
things.
try to make an argument, I'm just saying,
Mr. Lee,
before I go,
listen
let me
here.
finish up, Mr. Barry. I'm just saying that if you're telling me that I should forget what the transcript says,
I'm not saying that.
but
I'm saying
that's
to you,
what you said. So you're telling me that I don't understand what the transcript says?
Listen, if you said to me, Carlisle Powell, I want you to go downtown and order my lunch, and you must pay for my lunch. I say, I understand you. But I don't necessarily accept that I'm going downtown to pay for your
Oh,
lunch.
that's another argument.
No, that is putting it as plainly as I can.
No.
You don't come here to put words in our mouth.
No, I'm not trying to.
Are two totally different things.
No, sir. Respectfully.
But
I'm not.
let me walk this walk again, please. Let me walk this walk again. Are we saying that from the transcript then, the four parties were guilty, but two parties agreed to save the first two? Are we saying that? Is that the understanding from the reading of the transcript?
Well, I'll answer this way, Mr. Parry. You said you didn't read this transcript, right? You said you didn't read it.
I didn't read the transcript.
What I'm asking you to do respectfully is read the transcript. That's the question, the answer to my question.
Again, I'm going to tell you, I don't have to read the transcript, because the transcript is not the matter for the public. It is the order of the court that is the matter for the public. That transcript was released to create confusion, and it is creating confusion. That transcript was released to create confusion, and it is creating confusion. That transcript was released by Mark Brantley and his cohorts to create confusion. This is a delicate matter, you know. This is a delicate matter. no, this is a delicate matter. The court does not want to lose face. The court asked Mr. Henry Brown, my lawyer, and hence his lawyer, to make the adjustment to the order, and if it was acceptable to them, they will accept it. And that is what he did. That is what he did. The question you have to ask yourself, why did they change the order to remove Mr. Daniel's name and my name, and with this type of argument that we have here? And then you state, you refer to the transcript, which I have not read, which I have admitted that I have not read, and you indicate that these two people agreed. And I am trying to tell you that I have been advised by a lawyer that there's a big difference between agreed and understood.
So that matter will go out to court to club that understanding.
It doesn't have to, because
that's what I'm saying.
it doesn't have to, because they already said, excuse me, this is what they're saying. You have found me guilty of misfeasance and bad faith. You have said that these are the costs that have to be paid. If these two gentlemen names are removed, we understand that the cost remains. We understand that the cost remains, and we understand that we will have to pay it. That is the simple interpretation. Huh?
Which cost?
The cost that was applied to the four of us. The cost of $2.something million. I don't remember the figure is. $2.147 million.
Mr. Parry, I just want a clarification on something. The judgment you're referring to, when was that judgment given?
Which one?
That you're referring to?
The order that was given
one,
last
yeah.
week.
Okay, so you're not referring to the transcript, you're referring to the order of the
I'm
court.
referring to the order
That was given last week.
last week, yes.
Court issued an order last week?
Yes.
A written order?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what we
Did
did.
you issue a written order, a written judgment? Did the court issue a written judgment? Did the court issue a written judgment?
There's an order of the court that we have. There's an order of the court that we have. There's an order of the court that we
That's
have.
the one that they asked to.
Yes.
Well, yeah, but basically, that's what it said, because the transcript said that the two.
But the transcript is not an order, it's not a decision. The transcript is like no taking.
So you have
It's process.
Yeah.
Yeah, he has the order.
He has it, Mr. Parry.
Okay, next.
I'll send you a copy.
Which order? What do you went on then?
No, somebody.
No, I didn't read the
down.
order. I didn't read the order, but I have a copy of the order. When this is over,
Yeah, we'll get
and you
copies.
give your email, I will email it to you.
We'll get copies.
Yeah.
First of all, I register my complaint as a journalist that such a huge judgment, it was a very great matter of public interest, and the judgment was ruled last week without the presence of any journalist. Nobody hinted to us or tipped us there would be appeal judges in Nevis, and in other countries of the world that would be taken very seriously, because we would probably interpret what is being interpreted by both parties independently. I think in the future, such matters that affect the nation, the journalists should be present to represent the public. It was very difficult for us to report last week because we didn't have any facts, we were not present. Okay, my question is, do you think Ms. Lawrence and Benjamin were pressured by the legal fraternity to accept to pay the costs? Were their lawyers in court?
I do not know. I hope not. I hope not. I do not know. She has not communicated to me, and I will think that it's totally out of order and not a carriage of justice if any such thing happened. But I don't know, and I hope not. The first part of your statement, I think you're going to have to address that publicly. I can't deal with it.
No, I was just registering.
You were just registering it, okay.
My second question is, do you feel then the change of government in Nevis was a legal coup?
I think there was a coup. I think there was a coup. And you know, I said this coup started in 11. This coup started in 2011. You see, sometimes when you're an officer of the court and you know the law, or you have a good understanding, you can play the game right. I think the court was manipulated. I really think so. The whole thing, and let me explain why I'm saying this. For the last 40 years, we have practiced a certain procedure. Most of us didn't know it was wrong. Or I don't even know if it was wrong even now. Because the statement was that if a letter is delivered to the post office, it is deemed to have been delivered to the person. I think that was the law. And so we were under the impression that even if these people ran away and so on, and the letter was delivered to the post office, it was deemed to be delivered. I think Justice Lionel Jones came up with something else. And that in itself created a problem for us because people started to run from the postman. And so we had to actually get a bailiff to run them all over the place and deliver the affidavits to them or whatever was sent to them. That is how we were able to corner them in the end. The point I want to make is this, though, that people really were registered where they didn't live, and they admitted it in court. People did that because they wanted to influence the election. There's no doubt about that. Now, there were some people who were confirmed, another set of people, who were confirmed where they used to register. And there was some argument about that because they were accusing Mr. Benjamin of saying that is what could be done. My understanding, however, that we in Nevis were told that when we confirmed, we should give a truthful confirmation of where we lived. And that is what was expected. So that was one of the arguments of the court. But the point is this, simply, these people didn't live there, and some of them never lived there, 203. And when the votes were, when the counting was done, only 8 to 10 of them actually lived in St. John's, right? So even if you were to accept that hence they had won initially by 14 votes, and you took away 10, he would have still won by 4. That was never taken into consideration. But it seemed to me that when Mr. Brantley realized that he may not win at the polls, he found a way to deal with procedures. And the procedures were brought into question. And it's on the basis of procedures the case was tried over again. Now, Lionel Jones, I would say, was a wise judge in retrospect. Because what he said, look, I'm not putting back on the names. You say you didn't win, do it over, just have another election. What the appeals court did, he said, put on all the names. And then another court, a lower court, the day before the actual election, put on another 157 names. What chance did Mr. Daniel have? None. Absolutely none. So it was double jeopardy. So yeah, I think there was a coup somewhere in there.
And are you, as an opposition, going to move forward and push for the reformation of the laws?
Ask that question again, please.
Are you going to influence the policymakers so that the laws are reformed, the electoral laws are reformed?
There's need for electoral reform, serious need for electoral reform. There's a lot of confusion in St. Kitts-NEVIS right now. There's serious need for electoral reform. And let me say, we have supported it from the very beginning. We have been a victim of this type of gerrymandering in 2001. We were, you know. We went to court, and the same Don Mitchell threw our case out and said it was nonsensical on the basis that we had used the wrong route. We had used a petition. They're still using petition today. But that petition was wrong because some new rules of the court had been introduced, and obviously the court itself didn't fully understand that in terms of how you deal with the matter of registration and removal from the list, that you still use petition. We were abused in court in 2001. And here we come back 10 years later, and it's the same problem facing us. I believe that there should be a full, what you call enumeration. There should be a full enumeration. The whole thing needs cleaning up. The whole thing, because I'm sure we're going to have problems again in the federal election. In fact, you know what? I understand, and I need some clarification. It's true that people are trying to rent houses, old houses, in St. John's and in St. Thomas's, to put certain persons to live in those houses to claim that they're resident there so they could register there. It is happening right now. People are always finding ways and means of getting around the law. And you know what I find? It always seems to be the same person. Always seems to be the same person.
Are you likely to take this matter to the Privy Council?
We can't. We can't. This is the final court of appeal. We can't.
For this matter.
For this particular matter. Only if you go to the legislature and have the law change, you can then do it for the future.
Just for clarification, the total cost amount to how much?
I think it's 2.147 million.
2.17 million. And this, Mr. Parry, you were saying because they were officers of the government, they would more than likely, the government, who would be footing that bill? Would that be the government? The government would pay?
If it were me, the government would pay too.
Regarding the, well, let me just move from the court case a little bit and just go back to some local matters as addressed by Mr. Powell and Mr. Hector. The chief medical officer had, in an interview we had with him some time ago, spoke about the dialysis machine. And he seemed to have concurred with the government at the time that it takes time to implement all the necessary changes and to have the necessary preparation to have the dialysis machine functioning. You're saying, however, that that's not the case. Preparations were made ahead of time. Could you address that matter? Because the CMO is the chief medical officer. He's in charge of healthcare in the Federation, more or less. How would you respond to the assertions made that time that indeed the government, it seems, was making the right choice at the time regarding the machine?
I will just simply send you across to Mr. Daniel, who was the Minister of Health, but I would refer to one of our leading doctors here in Nevis, Dr. Glenville Liebert, who said give him an hour and he would get the process started. Dr. Glenville Liebert, you can look him up.
Would he need to speak to the chief medical officer in that case? Seeing that the CMO was saying that...
If I may cut in, Dr. Glenville Liebert was a colleague of the CMO at grammar school. Dr. Glenville Liebert graduated as the state scholar.
1976.
Dr. Glenville Liebert has been all over the world. I've studied at all universities and practiced all over the place. He's quite competent to speak. Quite competent to speak in terms of his scholarship, in terms of his experience, and in terms of his worldliness.
Let me very briefly explain to you, and just to add that Dr. Glenville Liebert is a fellow of the Royal Institute of Anesthesiologists, and they don't become that easily. Dr. Glenville Liebert has been with the Renal Society since 1998, when it was formed. I, of course, was the first president of the Renal Society. Over the years, the Renal Society has been agonizing for us to assist these patients because people have had to travel overseas for medical attention with dialysis care. They should go 3 times, Andre, but they have only been able to go 2 because of the costs mentioned by Mr. Powell. I, as the minister, when I became the Minister of Health, the Renal Society began to say, well, I want to see if you're going to let the time pass and don't do something for our people. Because here was Mr. Parry, Finance Minister. On one occasion, I called him late in the day to give me $100,000 to take to the people in Anguilla, because the people in Anguilla had a private arrangement with the patients, not with the government, but they were intending to stop the treatment. So I took money there. Subsequent to that, the Anguilla Health Authority sent a bill of $560,000 to them, to two persons. And Brantley and Associates added their 10% collection to the fees. To the fees. We took the view that we had to help the people. So I went to Florida. I had discussions with people from International Triage, and they came up with a concept that we should have a turnkey unit, which is a ready-to-use unit, a reconditioned trailer, a marine trailer, and then we put it in with two dialysis machines, Fresenius machines, brand new machines, filtration system, patient's chairs, the whole thing. We ordered it from Israel. But here it is what we were doing. And remember, in NEVIS, if there is anybody who knows about social planning and from concept to completion, I have to be in the list, very far up on the list. Okay, so I must know. And I did know. And I did do. We realized that we needed partners. So I went to the Medical University of the Americas. They gave us $100,000 to buy the machine. The Renal Society said, look, we are going to continue to raise money to help. Then we said, okay, what we are going to do, we are going to employ somebody. I had discussions with Dr. Gardner, who is Tobagonian, runs a unit in St. Croix, 30 machines in St. Croix. He says, look, when you are doing a new system like this, get somebody who is trained. Don't just train somebody in 2 weeks and then put them to do it. Get a professional nurse, recruit somebody with 2-3 years experience, and he says 5 would be ideal, but if you can't find 5, 2 to 3. He said, good. I will come as the consultant nephrologist once a month or once every 2 months, just to check on the patients. I will order your supplies to reduce the cost. When we left government, we were in the process of preparing the memorandum of understanding for this. It doesn't take rocket science to do. And so everything was in place to do that. And just for your own information and for the whole of NEVIS to be reminded, Mrs. Marjorie Morton ran a dialysis unit in her house in the 1980s for 6.5 years. So it's not rocket science. And as Dr. Glenville Libert says, he needs 1 single hour to get it operational. You know why he could say that? Because the machines, the unit came ready to operate. And we take the cue that Dr. Libert, having been with the Renal Society, he was committed to doing it. Now, the other question must be raised. Who benefits from the machine sitting down at the hospital while 4 persons have passed since that who could have been here needing the treatment? And is it a good thing for the future development of partnerships that the medical university will see its $100,000 sitting in the hospital yard? In addition to that, the company gave us 3 months supplies complimentary because the consumables are expensive. The time has passed for them. The expiry date has come. What needs to, the expiry date for the government need to come now to match that?
But the question is, though, another question is this. Is the unit in sync is operational? So people still have to be spending considerable sums of money. You know, we in NEVIS here, let me say this, and I'm speaking now about the NRP. We always have a sense of urgency when it comes to people's lives. We always have a sense of urgency when it comes to care. This is why we were able to make an arrangement with Cuba and why we were able to make an arrangement with Panama. The ministers get involved. Mr. Brantley went to Canada and said there are 5 persons on NEVIS now who need renal treatment, and that figure is not enough to have the unit put up. That is so insensitive and so uncaring. The whole point, but as Mr. Carlisle Powell said, Yet he identified 500 persons who are members of the renal society who may in the future need attention. This is an ongoing thing. But you know that one of the points that he's missing as Minister of Tourism? If you have a unit, there are persons who need treatment who will feel more comfortable coming to Nevis. If he's promoting tourism, he should have been the first to put that unit up. But he's just out there playing a movie star. That's all he's doing.
Good morning. This is Sazam Hall from Nevis Pages. This question is directed to the Senator, Mr. Powell. You spoke about events that have been taped by NNC, but have not been aired by the station. I would like to say that this is not the first time it has actually happened, because I could recall a few years ago when Oral Martin gave one of the best keynote speeches I probably heard at the graduation, and that was not being aired on NNC. You also spoke about CCM being fast asleep. Luckily for you, you are not the first person of that view, because Mark said a few years ago that CCM was fast asleep in 2004. Mr. Hector spoke about the incompetency of Mark in the Federal House, and luckily for him, he is not the first person to say that CCM is asleep, because Mark said in 2007 that Malcolm and Vance were fast asleep in the House. What do you think is the step forward on that?
They have passed their expiry date. It is time that the people of Nevis wake up and understand that CCM's stated position is one of neutrality. They have refused to come out of neutrality, and it is only left for the people of Nevis to say that they had a good government with the Nevis Reformation Party, a functioning government under the NRP, and what we have now is a dysfunctional government which has one aim. The biggest project at Nevis has been the firing of people. The second biggest project at Nevis has been painting some yellow and white lines around Nevis. Those are the two projects that they have brought to the country. None of them create jobs. The third biggest project has been in the area of Mr. Hector, Honorable Hector called it cultivation, cutting down mango trees for $3,000. I'm sorry, but those are what I see. The people of Nevis want jobs. They want money. They want a source of income. They must be able to make do, to pay for their own livelihoods. They must be able to live in an island free of discrimination, of injustices. And these are what CCM brought to the table. But the people were warned. Van Samri said, I'd smile with you, and I'll hit you boop boop in your solar plexus. Van Samri said, they were not going to pick out, they would put out. There is ample evidence before the people that this government is a vindictive, dysfunctional, useless government.
Honorable Hector, you have been chosen as the candidate to contest the upcoming federal elections. I would assume that you will be entering these elections opening the baton, since the elected minister now in the Federal House has not really delivered anything that he has spoke of. What is your appeal to people out there in the public as to why you think that they should give you the endorsement, the advocacy, and the support for these upcoming elections?
Zam, thank you for your question. Our party has time and time again ran on our record. I can be no different. As a minister, I think I have delivered. We have always operated on talking less and delivering more to the people of Nevis. I don't think that anybody in their right mind can look at a ticket on which you have Mark Brantley and Hector and decide to vote for Mr. Brantley was not performed. I have searched my mind over and over again to find out what has Mark Brantley brought back to us as Nevisians. I have used the measure, let us put him against Patrice Nisbet, the one who they've called a sellout. They've called him all kind of names. When you are to compare these two individuals, you realize that our position has always been the better position, to work with any party in St. Kitts for the best interests of Nevisians.
I am saying to you that the record that we have of Mark Brantley at this time is one of confusion, disrespect. In 2006, when I became a candidate, this sort of animosity was not in the atmosphere of politics. We saw a young guy who came forward with great promise. I believe he had promise. He disrespected everyone. He hatched a case in the court that brought him result. And let me say to you that as a lawyer, we are taught you must have a case theory. You must have some objectives before you approach the court. And this one is playing out to me in such a way that as a lawyer, I am ashamed. You had a case that was hatched, and the result came in favor of the CCM. I like the term that was used by the person there. Was there a legal coup? You are seeing a lawyer who is a senior lawyer and should be respected in this country. He's writing to the court, acknowledging the error of the court. And now we are faced to look at the transcript. My friends, the transcript from a court would always be what I would say controversial. You need to look at the court order. What is being said in the court? I would say today that I lay the responsibility of tarnishing Hensley's reputation, Mr. Parry's reputation, squarely at the foot of Mark Brantley. I'm saying to the people, they would have made a mistake. There's an opportune time now to change it. Thank you.
I want to thank you for your questions. I just want to remind the general public of the march, the walk to Charlestown by the NRP, 4 p.m. on Friday, 1st November, this Friday, and then a public rally in the heart of Charlestown at the D.R. Walwyn Plaza. Mr. Parry, could you just round up?
First of all, let me say that I'm very grateful that so many media houses turned up this morning. I thank you very much, and I thank you for the very frank and penetrating questions, because this is what we really need to get out to the public. I want to express that this march is a protest march. It is a march against the victimization of our people. It is a march against the victimization of Nevisians. George Morris, who I know very well, has been working since in the days when Labour was in government, before we had a government in Nevis. I don't know who he supported. But I do not know that George Morris goes out and canvass for anybody. He might support the Nevis Reformation Party, but I mean, people are free to support whoever they want to support. But George Morris reminds me of a gentleman from St. Kitts by the name of Mr. Pinney. Mr. Pinney, I think, is from Sandy Point. I don't know who he supports either. But Mr. Pinney is a professional, dedicated man working in water. And if it wasn't for Mr. Pinney, we would not have had the type of service we have here in Nevis. In fact, when we got into government in 2006, Mr. Pinney was there, nobody was using him, and we called him from St. Kitts, and he came. And he enabled us to put certain wells back into operation. And I think Mr. Pinney has been with us a long time, and he eventually said to us we have to train other people because he wasn't getting younger. Well, George Morris is such a person who I think is has the most practical experience on the island of Nevis. Worked with a man by the name of Mr. Kennedy, a man who worked in Montserrat, worked in Nevis, worked in BVI, and was able to give the greatest service. And here we have a project, a CDB project, and George is in charge of it, and George is summarily sent home. Who will replace him? Someone who doesn't have the experience? Someone who is a supporter? It makes no sense. We are talking about water here, and we are talking about development. Or take the case of Mrs. Truss, a lady who is a Christian, a lady whose husband helped to form the CCM, a founding member. She's a mere cleaner, and she has been sent home. We have had cleaners working with NRP, but they're cleaners. These are people working for a basic wage whose money can only provide them with food and maybe pay electricity and water. She has been summarily sent home. And I understand she's going to be replaced by somebody else. There's a young lady, a civil servant. She has been sent, she just came off 6 weeks leave. She's sent back home. I don't even know who she supports. These are the kinds of things that are taking place in this country, and people are not talking about it. Over 100 and something persons, some people say up to 200 persons, have been sent home. If it wasn't for the PEP program, Nevis would have been in a far more disastrous position. And take it from me, people are suffering. People have come to me who have needed help, who are working to pay their bills, to go to the grocery to shop, etc., etc. This is happening in Nevis right now. This is happening in Nevis right now. And what do we have? We have a government that claims to have a surplus.
3 million.
How did they get the surplus? What did they do to get the surplus? It makes no sense. You cannot see one project, you cannot see the expansion in the economy anywhere where this government can truly claim to have an honest surplus. You know, the government now speaks of the Amman Hotel. The Amman Hotel that they say will start in January. And they speak of geothermal. What was NRP talking about? Amman, geothermal, fisheries, the oil storage plant, the cosmetology center, etc., etc. They have no plans. How can you go and challenge a government? How can you go before 12,000 people and tell them you want to represent them when you have no plans of your own whatsoever and you can talk about surplus? So you come with the Amman Hotel that we have been working on, and you come with the geothermal project that we have been working on and which was criticized. Vance Ambry said there will never be an Amman in Gingerland. That is what we had happening during the campaign. Now they come to the people of Nevis with their projects. But what are the other growth projects? None. This country cannot continue to depend on borrowing, and we have said that over and over. You need to have a package of development, and the Concerned Citizens Movement has none. In fact, they said there's nobody in CCM who understands economics, nobody in CCM who understands development, and nobody has the political will, any kind of will whatsoever, to do what is necessary to develop the country. Now, I must touch on this, the federal relationship. I cannot see CCM running the federal government in the federal elections because they're incapable of running the country as it is Nevis. They have demonstrated no ability whatsoever. And it's very interesting that they speak of working with a group called the Unity Group in St. Kitts, but the Unity Group does not have the guts to criticize the victimization and all the wrong things that are taking place in Nevis. Is this what unity is about? Victimization, lack of progress, no policies, and empty promises, like Mark Brantley has gone and promised the Guyanese cheap lands, just like he promised Nevis people cheap lands. Then the people of Nevis got none, and the Guyanese are going to get none. This gentleman just manipulates the people of the Caribbean, including Nevisians, and the people of St. Kitts. It's a very sad thing. I want to say to you that I am not surprised that Unity cannot have a meeting in Nevis, because while Mr. Brantley is too far in, as they said he can't get out, Mr. Ambry doesn't want to go in. And I have a saying, and it is not my own. It is an old saying. One is, the leopard can't change its spots. That is not the one I want to quote, but they say the scorpion stings. The story is told of the scorpion crossing the river on the back of a frog, having promised the frog he will not sting it. In the middle of the stream, the scorpion stung the frog, and the frog went down, and he was going down, he said, I thought you promised me. The scorpion said, there's one thing a scorpion does. It stings. And I end there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Parry, and other members of the head table. Thank you very much to the members of the press for coming and participating. And of course, we look forward to your putting out stories regarding what is happening in Nevis.